This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Kansas Farm Service Agency Agriculture Program Specialist Michael Martin begins today's show with a reminder about the upcoming ARC and PLC program deadlines. Continuing today's show is Tawnie Larson, project consultant for the Kansas Agriculture Safety and Health Program at K-State, as she talks about farm safety and a survey that producers can complete to help her better share farm safety information. The show ends today with K-State's Brad White, Bob Larson, and Brian Lubbers on another part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast. This week, the group has a conversation about what could be causing hoof issues. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show with some information from the Kansas Farm Service Agency. And this week, we're joined by Kansas FSA Agriculture Program Specialist Michael Martin. Michael, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me today. It's great to be here.
Michael, as we're talking about the Farm Service Agency, are there any programs that our Kansas producers should hopefully know about and if not, be made aware of?
Sure. Right now, one of the key things going on in the county offices for our producers is the Agricultural Risk Program and Price Loss Program. Sign-ups underway on that. Sign-up started on that program December 18th, and that action was authorized by Congress when they extended the Farm Bill by a year. And they passed that legislation on November 16th of 2023.
And so registration started on December 18th, but what about the deadline for that?
Yeah, so the deadline for ARC or PLC, it's kind of a blended program, March 15th, 2024, so just a little over 3.5 weeks away or so, less than a month. Anyway, there's no late filed provisions for the program. So if producers want to make some election changes on their farms, they need to do that by March 15th.
And when it comes to ARC and PLC, they're not exactly the same thing. So can producers switch from one to the other if they did ARC last year and want to do PLC this year?
Yeah, great question. So I guess in a nutshell, or a quick way to describe those, ARC is a kind of a revenue-based program where PLC is price only. A little more explanation on that. ARC County targets revenue considerations and county average yields and uses the U.S. market year average crop prices. The calculation for ARC County also uses an Olympic average, which it drops the high and the low for the last 5 years on the yield. And then under ARC, we also have individual coverage, and it's similar to ARC County, but it's also different. And with ARC IC, as we call it with our acronyms, the producer establishes their own benchmark revenue for the specific yields and does not use county average yields in their calculation to determine shortfalls. So it's kind of based on what the producer can raise, what they grow on their own farm, instead of comparing it to all the farms in the county. And then lastly, under PLC, each commodity has a reference price that was established in the Farm Bill. And during the market year average price, if the market year average price for that specific commodity falls below the reference price, then that would be used to determine if there's a program benefit on the shortfall of the price.
A lot of different kind of technicalities in there. And is that something that FSA people in their service centers can help them walk through and help make those decisions?
Yeah, so we can't really guide someone on this option may fit your operation better, but we can explain the differences within the three options so producers can hopefully make the best decision for their operation.
That deadline is March 15th, and what happens if someone misses that deadline?
So great question. March 15th is the deadline, and that's for the election and the enrollment. We don't have any, as I mentioned before, we don't have any late filed provisions for the election option. However, if a producer does not make it into the office by March 15th, their election choice from the prior year, which would be fiscal year 23, they would still be locked into that election, but they still are able to make an enrollment to enroll and sign up for the program. We do have late filed provisions for that, but part of the process with that is if they don't meet the March 15th deadline, they have to provide an explanation to the county committee as to why the enrollment was late. So after March 15th, can't change your elections. You can enroll late, but it's a little more of a process to do so.
Is this something that involves a lot of paperwork, so people should get started on before March 14th?
Yeah, we don't want customers waiting till the last day, because if everybody did that, there's no way it's humanly possible that every producer in a county could be taken care of in one day. So, if you've been doing your research, you kind of know what elections you want, go ahead and contact the county office. They can run those contracts. You can stop in and get them signed, or they can email them to you and you can sign electronically, just whatever works best for the customer.
If someone is interested in ARC or PLC or any FSA program out there, how can they find out more information?
So producers can always contact their local USDA Service Center. We have 96 county offices across the state and Kansas. You can always find out about ARC or PLC that way, or other FSA programs. If anybody has a smartphone or access to the internet, you can always go to Farmers.gov, that's Farmers.gov. You can find out about a plethora of information there, everything going on with FSA, and also in the upper right-hand corner, there's a search or a service center locator tool. So you can click on that, and even if you were traveling for vacation or something and you needed to find out the local service center, let's say you were in Florida and you needed to sign some paper, you could pull that up on your smartphone, find out where you could go, and your county office in Kansas could send that form or whatever needed to the county office in Florida. So we want producers to be able to access us from anywhere, and make things easy for them to get us the forms and things they need to participate in their programs.
Michael, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and share with us some information about ARC and PLC programs from the Farm Service Agency.
Thank you for having me today. Enjoyed my time visiting with you.
That was Kansas Farm Service Agency Agriculture Program Specialist Michael Martin discussing the upcoming deadline for the Agriculture Risk Coverage and Price Loss Coverage programs from the Farm Service Agency. These programs are often also referred to as ARC and PLC. That deadline that's coming up is March 15th, 2024. If you'd like to find out more information about these, there are a few ways you can do that. You can go to the FSA website, which you can find at Farmers.gov, or go to your local service center. If you don't know where that is, you can also find it by going to Farmers.gov and in the upper right-hand corner, clicking on Service Centers. You can also find more information from Robin Reid and Jenny Ifft by going on AgManager.info. I will link all of these resources in today's show notes on agtoday.net. Before we cut to a break, we're now going to be joined by USDA's Rod Bain and Chief Economist Seth Meyer as he discusses the USDA's agricultural outlook.
What does U.S. ag production and commodity prices look like for 2024? Agriculture Department Chief Economist Seth Meyer provided the annual outlook, starting with how prices support what commodities growers might plant this year.
Maybe that prices support soybeans a little bit more than corn, so maybe we move a little bit of area back into soybeans. Corn prices moving a little bit lower as well. Sorghum area is largely unchanged. Wheat, after responding to the global demand for wheat because of action in the Black Sea, farmers saying, okay, we'll move out of wheat, we responded. Cotton being perhaps one of the areas where where we see a little bit of area growth, and certainly if weather is normal, some big rebounds in production. And rice, pretty steady overall in area.
He adds in terms of supplies, corn and bean stock should continue to build in 2024, while wheat and rice supplies are forecasted to tighten this year. Turning to potential livestock production and prices.
The price of swine, a little bit higher, but remember, feed's a lot higher. If you've got cattle and you can run them, you'll make some money. The question is will you have those forage conditions? Turkeys, industry facing some serious demand issues and putting a lot of downward pressure. And on eggs, there's a lot of volatility in that. We had a lot of HPAI issues.
Meanwhile, slow milk production growth and firm demand, both domestically and internationally, should translate to mostly higher dairy prices in 2024. The ag forecast from USDA includes a continued lowering of output prices.
Many prices showing further erosion in the next crop year. Maybe cotton not seeing much of an erosion or even a little bit of a price increase, but many of those commodities coming down in price.
Coupled by consistently higher prices for most inputs.
Fertilizer prices absolutely have come down from their peak. We had some thought that maybe we'll see a little bit of easing of interest rates over time, but for many of the other lines in a crop budget, they tend to move and be sticky when commodity prices fall. Input prices for maybe things other than fertilizer, fuel oil, things like repairing your vehicle or your tractor, other things involved in the supply chain, those prices not coming down.
So what might be the potential bottom line for producers in calendar year 2024?
Producers are going to have a challenging year overall when it comes to narrow margins.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Once again, that was USDA's Rod Bain and Chief Economist Seth Meyer. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Wednesday show discussing farm safety with project consultant for the Kansas Agriculture Safety and Health Program at Kansas State University, Tawnie Larson. Tawnie, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Tawnie, talking about farm safety, and first, wanting to share a few facts with our listeners.
So just a few facts real quick about ag safety in Kansas. The common age that most people are injured on the farm are 45 years old or older. And a lot of the accidents or incidents, we like to call them, are related to machinery and transportation, maybe tractor rollovers, interacting with livestock, working in confined spaces. And it's important that every age a person, whether it's the little kids on the farm up to the older folks that we have working out there, to just be safe and mindful as they're out working on the farm.
And something really important to think about then, because they like being on the farm and accidents can cause them to be off the farm for quite a while.
Yes, the average is 10 days that someone is off the farm with an injury. And yes, I understand that you may think I would never take 10 days off of the farm, but maybe it would be a good idea to do that, to go ahead and heal, whether it's after a sprain or a strain, or maybe even a outpatient surgery or something. When your doctor tells you that you should take the time off, it's a really good idea. We kind of have this little saying we've been talking about in our program that it's better to be smart than tough sometimes. So I think if people would pay a little bit of attention and give their body chances to heal, then overall they might do better off.
Especially when thinking about what long-term effects there could be for them and their body.
So some of the chronic illnesses that we see with producers are respiratory problems, as well as hearing deficiencies, being around dust and anything else that's flying in the air. There's a lot of pollution when you're out there working your fields. That'll be coming up. We'll see a lot of dust and we'll see a lot of smoke. And so it's really important to wear some protection, whether it's a respirator, if what you're doing requires that, or really just even a dust mask. I mean, we're all used to wearing those, right? But really try and protect your lungs as well as protecting your hearing. When you're out on tractors and you're working on equipment, if you don't have a cab, or you're not enclosed, maybe you're just tinkering around with it and getting things started up for this season, it's really important to wear hearing protection.
And as we're thinking about getting things started for this season, more big machinery is going on the road. And first, thinking about maybe what farmers should keep in mind as they're driving down the road.
Absolutely. It's important when you have to be on the road. I know not everybody likes to be, but sometimes that piece of equipment has to go from one field to another or maybe into the shop. And so if you're out there on the road, just be really careful when you are thinking of turning left. A lot of times the average citizen doesn't know that they probably shouldn't pass you on the left because you may be turning. And you also need a wide turn. So and you might take over to the right a little bit so you can turn left, and they think you're giving that signal to pass. So be as careful as possible in watching to see what's happening behind you. There are a fair amount of accidents during spraying, harvest, and planting seasons.
And as we're thinking about the farmer's not always in the tractor, and there's a bunch of other people just in their normal cars, so keeping in mind that big machinery.
Absolutely. If you are on a rural road in Kansas between now and probably next Christmas, you need to really pay attention. If you do come up behind some farm equipment, they are probably not going to be on the road for very long. And so if you can just sit back and be patient, enjoy the view, you're out in God's country, and give that guy a little bit of time to get to where he's going.
And Tawnie, we've been talking maybe for the producers who've spent more time in the tractor and are spending more time on the farm, but also need to remember the youth who are maybe wanting to enter into the industry. And there's some classes that will be taking place over the summer thinking about youth farm safety, specifically around tractors and large machinery.
Right. 14 and 15-year-olds are allowed to work on farms as employees. So whether it's the family farm, the neighbor, or even a larger production. And they do need to take a class. It's called the Youth Tractor and Machinery course, and it is offered by K-State Research and Extension counties and districts around the state. So if you have a 14 or 15-year-old and they're going to go work on the farm this summer, please go ahead and get them in one of those classes and get some training. And that'll just make your life a lot easier. You don't have to be the bad guy, and get them out there so they can learn from somebody.
For people who are interested in that class, how can they find out more information?
They can visit our website, and we'll put that in the show notes later.
As we round out kind of this portion of the farm safety conversation, what are a few key points that you really want producers and farmers to keep in mind when it comes to any time of the year, especially when they're getting their big machinery out?
So I think really taking your time, taking a little bit slower than usual. Sometimes maybe this equipment hasn't been out of the barn for a while. So do some good walk-arounds the first several times you have equipment out, and also just slowing down. Most of the people that I talk to that have had rollovers or other types of incidents, they usually want to just pass along to people that it's a good idea to slow down, take a look at what's going on, think about your plan, what you're going to do. Is it safe? Do I need safety equipment? Do I have the right tools? And just really put together a solid plan before you get out there in the field.
And Tawnie, you're wanting to help share farm safety with other people, but before that, you want to hear from those people for how they'd like to hear about it.
Absolutely. We're really excited. We received a pilot grant, and we are conducting a survey that when we want to hear from producers, extension agents, anyone that works in ag or the ag industry. And the purpose of this survey is so that we can put together programming that people want. What do they want to see in safety programming? How do they want to receive it? So is it more about machinery, highway safety? For example, there's questions on this survey that pertain to maybe respiratory disorders or hearing loss, eye injuries. That's really important to some people. So we want to hear, what do you really need for yourself? And then what do you think is needed in the state? So what have you seen throughout as you work day-to-day in agriculture? And then we also want to hear, how do you want to receive that information? Do you want to get it on Facebook or other social media? Do you want to get it in a Zoom or a personal presentation? So that's what we want to hear. And if you will fill out my survey, I will send you a free pair of really cool purple knit K-State Research and Extension gloves.
For people who are interested in taking this survey, how long will it likely take them to complete it?
I think it'll just be about 10 minutes. It doesn't take long. It is anonymous. So you do not have to give me your information unless you do want a pair of gloves, and there is a separate link that you can follow to give me that information so we can mail those to you.
What is the web address for people to be able to find this link?
The web address is kstate.edu/kash, which is KASH, and that stands for Kansas Agriculture, Safety, and Health.
Tawnie, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and share with us some information about farm safety and how producers can help you be able to share information with them.
Thank you for having me.
That was project consultant for the Kansas Agriculture Safety and Health Program at Kansas State University, Tawnie Larson, and she was discussing farm safety as well as a survey that, if you have time, would take about 10 minutes of your time and would help provide their program with important information around agriculture safety and health programming. The first 500 participants will receive a free pair of KSRE gloves. You can find more information about this survey and do it by going to www.k-state.edu/KASH. Again, that is www.k-state.edu/KASH. I would also like to take the time to remind you about some upcoming events, which will all be linked in today's show notes, which, as always, you can find on agtoday.net. The first one is the Kansas Corn and Soybean School, which is a partnership that's taking place between Kansas Corn, Kansas Soybean, and K-State Research and Extension. The last school is taking place tomorrow, Thursday, February 22nd, from 6 to 8. This is an online school which you can get registered for by going to www.kscorn.com/school. The next event that I'd like to let you know that's coming up is a white-tailed deer biology and management program being led by K-State wildlife specialist Drew Ricketts. He will give a presentation on white-tailed deer biology, space use, cover requirements, nutritional requirements, managing white-tailed deer habitat, supplemental feeding, and managing white-tailed deer populations. And of course, there will be time for questions. This event is taking place at the Agricultural Research Center in the Hayes Auditorium, which is at 1232 240th Avenue. Everyone is welcome to attend this event and no RSVP is necessary. If you have any questions, you can contact the Cottonwood District Extension Office at 785-628-9430. Again, that is 785-628-9430. Also, just a reminder about a couple other events that are upcoming that we've heard a little bit about before. February 29th is the Stockmen's Dinner taking place at the Stanley Stout Center. And then on the following day, March 1st, is the Cattlemen's Day, which will take place in Weber Arena. And then following that afternoon on March 1st is the Legacy Bull and Female Sale, which is taking place at the Stanley Stout Center. You can find more information about all of these events by going to ksubeef.org. And the last events that I want to remind you about before we cut to a break are the Kansas Farm and Ranch Transition Conferences. The first one is taking place Wednesday, March 6th in Garden City, and then following that on the 7th, there's one in Great Bend, and after that, it wraps up on March 8th in Manhattan, Kansas. Once again, I will link information to all of these different events in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're now cutting to a short break, but we'll be back with more ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Wednesday show with a portion of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast. Today, we're joined by Brad White, Bob Larson, and Brian Lubbers.
So we had a listener question, and it's relative to hoof care. And the question was, I'm having some cattle with longer hooves that we've had to trim over the last few years. We've had grass diets, we've had grain diets along with grazing. Doesn't seem to matter, and I wanted to get your input on what you guys think. For the purposes of this, I'm not 100% sure from the question, but I think we're talking cows. So let's dive into what do you think that might be?
Well, the scenario that they described, kind of adult cows that have some hoof problems and, the hooves are growing long, that it can be kind of frustrating to deal with. One of the things that can lead to that is acidosis, some high grain diets, or even, on crop residue fields or something like that, where some cows got some actual acidosis, which then leads to some hoof problems. But that's not the only thing that can cause problems like that. Dry environments can be hard on hooves. Mud can be really hard on hooves, so really mud environments. And we do know that there's some nutritional aspects to hoof growth. Some of our minerals are really important to good, healthy hoof growth. So if this was a client of mine, I think you need to go into it with, well, we need to really figure out what combination of things, and then even genetics. We think that there's, the actual kind of the way the animal is built as far as how that hoof hits the ground is important. So there's a number of places where we could be having a problem here leading to what they're seeing.
I guess I read the question a little bit differently, and this is one of those, maybe a few more details would be helpful. So in beef cattle operations, it's not common that we would need routine trimming. Normally, walking around on sand, rocks, whatever, the normal wear kind of keeps those hooves at the length that they need to be. But if this is a herd where you've got some older cows, it may not even just be hoof pathology. It's just every once in a while, you're going to have to trim a cow or two. So if you're talking a few a year out of 100, that's probably just a normal rate where, for whatever reason, and maybe she's older, she's not moving around as much, she's not wearing that hoof like she should be, not because she has something wrong, she didn't have a hoof illness, it's just normal, right? And so I guess maybe a little more information about how many are we talking about. But yeah, Bob's right. Like when you get into some of the pathologies where, if you've got an animal that's lame and they're not putting weight on that leg, they're not going to wear that. And so you may get one claw or one hoof that gets a little bit longer, especially if it's an extended period of time. It could be that, if they're out there on a really soft environment, they may just not be wearing hooves like they normally should be. I guess and I'm kind of coming at the beef side for the dairy experience is, we do hoof trimming all the time, right? It's just part of routine. Most of the time it's based on a pathology. We've got a foot rot, a sole abscess, something like that. But there's some routine trimming that gets built into that as well. So I don't know that a little bit of routine trimming is abnormal, but like you said, maybe a little more information help direct that particular listener question.
Absolutely. I think you guys are spot on. And a couple things that you're saying. One, it could have been a pathology that occurred previously and now we're seeing after effects. So whether that was the lameness, the acidosis, some of those we're seeing those after effects, or it could be normal. So is the first thing that you're recommending is figure out exactly not only what, but who, right? So what you're saying with the numbers.
Yeah, just numbers in general, right? So if you tell me it's 2% a year that need a routine trim, okay, and especially if it's a lot of older cows, that probably is normal. You tell me it's 50% of the herd every year, yeah, there's something else going on.
Yeah, but a closer look at those feet, because the things that you're thinking, you talked about, Bob, you talked about acidosis, Brian mentioned foot rot. There's also, sometimes we'll discuss like a corkscrew claw or a claw that's starting to turn under that you will have to do, which we think there's a genetic component to that portion, and you'll have to trim those. Is there anything we're missing on our list? But all those I'd be able to distinguish visually, or sole abscess.
Sole abscess.
Yeah, I do think cattle are big animals, and so it's not easy to pick up their feet, but it's really important if you're having foot problems to really do a good examination.
That's the key. Get them in, get them to a good facility where you can examine those and figure out exactly what's going on.
Once again, that was part of BCI's Cattle Chat podcast. You can hear the whole episode on the podcast streaming platform of your choice. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.